Today, I want to tell you how we're going to overthrow a government. But before we do, I want you to understand who, how, and why. For the last 2 months, the world has been riveted to Ferguson, Missouri after the murder of unarmed black male Michael Brown by a cop named Darren Wilson. Ferguson is a small town that has a big white racism problem. The city of Ferguson has 21,000 residents. 67% of them are black. However, only 15% of its elected city government is black, and only 5% of its police department is black. So how did an overwhelmingly black city become an apartheid regime? First, let's look at the law. In Ferguson, the law says they hold elections only on the first Tuesday following the first Monday in the month of April, but only in odd-numbered years. No, I did not make up that Alice in Wonderland jumble of trick clauses. That is the law in Ferguson of when elections are held. So it should come as no surprise that voter turnout is low. But for the white minority, this is a good thing because it suppresses the black vote. Only 17% of white voters participated in the last elections in Ferguson. But that was enough since only 6% of black voters showed up. I wanted to know how these politicians in Ferguson got elected to office and who supported them. But we didn't go to Ferguson and take selfies of ourselves to post up on Instagram. We sent an operative to Ferguson to obtain the city council members' campaign finance records. You should know that the Ferguson City Council has 6 members. First, we take a look at Kim Tian. She's the only woman on the city council and a Republican. Her finance records show that she raised only $690. That's right. She used most of that at a printing company to have campaign signs made and for campaign ads in the local Ferguson newspaper. It doesn't sound like much, but that was enough money to get her elected to the Ferguson City Council. Most of you make more in a week than she spent on her entire campaign. That should tell you something. Next, we look at Dwayne James, the only black member of the city council. His finance records show that he raised $1,885, almost twice as much as Miss Tian. And, like Tian, he spent all his money on print advertising. No radio ads, no TV campaign, just printing up signs and postcards. And that was enough to get him on the city council. But if Dwayne James sounds like he has deep pockets, he's nothing compared to Mark Byrne. Mark Byrne's campaign records show that he raised $3,240. That would make him the big money politician in the town of Ferguson. But that's okay because his records also show that even though he raised $3,200, he only spent half of it. I guess this was overkill. I also find it interesting that his largest campaign contributor was a bail bondsman. They gave him 1/3 of his campaign budget. I guess they're hoping for big things in the jail business in Ferguson and that Mr. Byrne will be able to help. And judging by the antics of the Ferguson court system, it's clear that they're going to get their money's worth. More on that later. Lastly, we come to the mayor of Ferguson, Jay Knowles. He's an aspiring career politician. Like several of the white politicians in Ferguson, he claims to be an independent and not a Republican, but you wouldn't know it by the way he acts. Now, we were able to get a hold of his finance records too, but just like that catacomb maze of an election law, it was equally evasive to get Mr. Knowles' finance records, and he wanted it that way. In Missouri, the law states that all politicians who raise more than $500 must submit a campaign finance report to the State Ethics Commission so your finance records can be posted online for the public to see. But there's a loophole. If you're running for office in a town with less than 100,000 people, you are exempt from having to file with the State's Ethics Commission and would only be required to file at the county level. So even though the Ferguson City Council filed their forms online with the State Ethics Commission, Mayor Knowles refused to do that and instead filed as St. Louis County. But that's not all. There's another loophole at the county level. St. Louis County also makes records available online unless a candidate opts not to do so. And guess what Mayor Knowles did? He filed on paper, not electronically, even though it would have been easier to just file electronically. What this means is that you have to actually go to the Election Commission office in Missouri in person with a driver's license, because they want to know who's snooping around to protect their democracy, and you have to pay 10 cents for each page of Mayor Knowles' finance report. There were 40 pages. As you can see, Mayor Knowles did not want to make it easy for people to see how much money he got and where he got it from. But this is the Black channel. They wanted us to show up in person, so we sent someone to the Election Commission in Missouri and got Mayor Knowles' records, despite his best attempts to stop us. His campaign records show that when he ran for re-election in 2011, he raised $2,030. It claims he spent $2,513, so he actually went slightly in debt, if you can call $500 in a political campaign debt. So this means that City Councilman Byrne actually raised more money than the mayor did, and even still, the mayor only spent $2,500. But that was enough to get elected mayor in the city of Ferguson. And from there, Michael Brown's fate was sealed, as was the rest of the black population there. Ferguson is a city of only 21,000 people. You could fit the whole town in the average NFL stadium 3 times over. And yet, the city court in 2013 issued 32,975 arrest warrants for non-violent offenses, mostly traffic tickets. 32,000 traffic warrants in a town of 21,000 people, including children. The police and the court system of Ferguson is a racket, and 67% of the population are its targets. Even more staggering, Ferguson collects total revenues of $20 million in 2013. 10% of that money, $2 million, came from court fines. And guess which segment of the population gets most harassed by police and sent to court to pay fines? Here's a picture from a city amnesty program in Ferguson that allowed citizens to pay on delinquent traffic warrants. The line is literally down the block. The police aren't policing black neighborhoods. They're targeting them. Under Jim Crow, black people paid extra fines and taxes, even to vote. It's the 21st century, and Jim Crow is alive and well. All of this abuse finally culminated in the murder of Michael Brown. And now the question is, why did this happen? The answer is the black citizens of Ferguson didn't show up at City Hall, and the white supremacists did. And the result is that a city that is 67% black finds itself being lorded over by the other 33%, with deadly consequences. And at this point, there's simply no excuse for it. We undertook this investigation to make a point. Mayor Knowles is the leader of the city of Ferguson, and he's using his position to protect a killer cop who murdered an unarmed citizen. Mayor Knowles didn't have to spend millions of dollars to get into office. He spent less money than most people spend for a used car. Cash. All white supremacy cost Jay Knowles was $2,500. And believe it or not, it gets even worse. Remember when I said that all politicians in Missouri who raise more than $500 are required to file a finance report? You'll recall that I only gave you the report on 3 of the 6 city council members. That's because the other 3 city council members did not file campaign reports. In other words, half the Ferguson City Council claimed they raised less than $500 to get their seats. Knowing this, I don't think we can even say that the situation in Ferguson is even a money problem. This is just apathy and indifference. But the murder of Mike Brown may have changed all that. Now that you know how little it takes to run a successful campaign in Ferguson, it's time for black people to join together and do something about what is clearly a corrupt enclave of white supremacy. It's time to overthrow the white supremacist government of Ferguson. On TV, Feed the Children talks about how you can save a child overseas for less than the price of a cup of coffee. Well, in Ferguson, you can run for mayor or city council for less than the cost of a set of rims, and the life you save might be your own. This should be the last time we see a city council in Ferguson where a city that is only 1/3 white controls 90% of the city government, and a city that is 2/3 black has only 3 black people on the police force and only 1 black person in elected office. It doesn't take much. In the coming weeks, I want us to choose candidates and to hold a crowdfunding. If we can find serious candidates to run for office in Ferguson, let's give them the votes, but more importantly, let's give them the money in order to run a viable campaign. Even though we're 67% of the population in Ferguson, white supremacy has already reared its ugly head to support bigotry. White supremacists around the country thank Darren Wilson for his act of murder by donating $400,000 to a defense fund for him, and is practically guaranteed that the keyboard Klansmen of America will be online for the next election in Ferguson to try to make sure that black oppression stays in place. But that's okay, because we don't need to spend more. We just need to spend enough. We just need the right people running and to get out the vote. And all the money on earth can't stop that from happening. We see black men being murdered by white supremacists every week in America. Marching and protesting are not working. It never has, and it never will. We need to come together, but not to pray or hold up signs at City Hall. We need to hold up dollars. And in a few months, the City Council of White Supremacy will look like a City Council of Black Empowerment. Then you'll see things begin to change. Now that you know the bad guys' financial resources, you're able to get up and do something about them. So come on, let's make Huey Newton and Malcolm X proud. And let's go overthrow a government.